Dustwater was the kind of town that kept its head down and its prayers quiet. It squatted under the midday sun, all heat shimmer and wind-borne grit, the kind of place where nothing much happened until the day the storm rode in. Evelyn Hart stood outside the schoolhouse, brushing chalk dust from her skirts. Her copper-red hair, pinned up against the heat, stuck to her damp neck as she watched the children run into the street, chasing after a stray chicken. Their laughter echoed off the clapboard buildings, and for a brief second she almost believed. The world was kind. She shaded her eyes and looked west, where the horizon smudged under a curtain of rising dust. The air shifted. The wind carried something wrong in it. She smelled leather, sweat, gun oil. The first rider appeared like a shadow peeled from the earth. Then another. Then 7 more. 9 men in total. They didn't slow as they entered town. Horses lathered with foam, spurs flashing like teeth. At the front rode a man in a duster black as midnight, and a wide-brimmed hat tilted low. His face was sun-creased and sharp, beard patchy, and his eyes hidden behind dust goggles. He raised a hand, and everything exploded into movement. Evelyn barely had time to register the gunshots before people started screaming. A man fell from the saloon steps, clutching his belly. Another out-long-haired, sneering, grabbed a woman from the general store by her hair and flung her into the street. "Get inside!" Evelyn shouted at the children, but her voice was buried in chaos. She lunged for Tommy Fielding, the smallest boy, dragging him behind her as bullets cracked through the air. The schoolhouse door slammed shut behind them. "Under the desks," she ordered, voice trembling. She slid to the window and peeked out. The riders had spread out, barking orders, guns drawn. They weren't here to rob a bank. There was no bank. Dustwater didn't have enough wealth to tempt anyone, which made their arrival all the more terrifying. It wasn't money they were after. It was something or someone else. She scanned the street. Old Sam Holloway, the blacksmith, tried to raise his shotgun, but one of the riders shot him in the leg. The others laughed. They were enjoying this. The man in the black duster dismounted. He moved slowly, deliberately, like he owned the ground. He walked on. He reached the middle of town, adjusted his goggles, and turned to face the schoolhouse. "Miss Evelyn Hart," he called out, voice rasped by smoke and whiskey. "Come on out, darlin'. I promise I'll be gentle." The children whimpered behind her. She stepped outside before she had time to think better of it. The sunlight was brutal. She blinked and squared her shoulders. "You've got the wrong town," she said. "There's nothing here for you." The man grinned. "Oh, there is, you." She didn't flinch, though her heart thundered. "You're Jed Crowder," she said. "Now I'm touched," he said. "You remember me." "I remember what you did in Waco. I remember the fire." "The screaming," Crowder chuckled. "You don't seem the type to hold a grudge. You murdered 5 people." He shrugged. 6 by my count, but I'm not here to settle old scores. I'm here to collect a debt. Evelyn's throat tightened. She took a step back. "There's no debt." Crowder's face darkened. "Your brother cost me 2 men and half my fortune. He promised us land, gold, and safe passage through Comanche territory. You know what we got? Ambushed, scalped, to rot, and now your brother's 6 feet under, and I don't get my due." Evelyn's voice wavered. "He tried to make peace. He died for it. I don't care what he tried. He lied." Crowder pulled a length of rope from his saddlebag. "So now I take you. We'll see if his ghost comes running." The townsfolk cowered in silence. No sheriff. No heroes. Just fear. Evelyn took a breath, deep and slow. "I won't go quietly." Crowder nodded. "Good." He snapped his fingers. 2 of his men jumped from their horses and closed in. Evelyn kicked one in the stomach before the other cracked her. across the head with his pistol. She went down hard Dot as the world spun and darkened. She thought of her brother's grave under the cottonwood tree. She thought of the children. She thought of how it felt to scream and be unheard. Then blackness swallowed her Dot up on the ridge. Tayakua watched through narrowed eyes. The Comanche warrior lay flat against the rock, a long-blown rifle across his arms. The wind tugged at the feathers in his braid. Below, the outlaws loaded the unconscious woman onto a horse and rode out of town like thunder rolling over the plains. He recognized the woman. Evelyn Hart. She had once come into the Comanche camp when her brother tried to broker peace. She'd brought medicine for a fevered child. She'd spoken their language, badly, but with heart. He had watched her then, curious, wary. A white woman who did not flinch from their faces. Now she was a prisoner. Behind him, another Comanche, his cousin. Nabe whistled softly. Let the white men fight each other. Their war is not ours. Taikoa didn't answer. He studied the path of the outlaws, the dust plume trailing behind them like a wounded serpent. Evelyn Hart had once knelt beside a dying child and whispered words no one else bothered to learn. She had seen them as people. Tayekua rose to his feet. We ride. At dawn. Evelyn's head throbbed. Her wrists were bound to the saddle horn, and her lips were cracked. They'd ridden for what felt like hours across blistering terrain through canyons, arroyos, dried riverbeds. She tasted copper in her mouth. Crowder rode beside her, humming tunelessly. You always this stubborn? He asked Dot. She didn't respond. You should have run when you had the chance. I did, she muttered, but evil always catches up. He barked a laugh. You think I'm evil? I know it. Maybe. But evil's honest. It don't pretend to be something else. She spat at his boot. You're still a coward. Crowder's expression flickered. Say that again, and I'll cut out your tongue. She looked away. Around her, the desert stretched empty and cruel. But somewhere, past the haze and heat, her instincts whispered something else. Not hope, exactly. Something quieter. A presence. Watching Dot, she blinked the sweat from her eyes and saw a hawk circling far above them. The same kind her brother once said meant a warrior was near. They wouldn't come for her. Who would? But something stirred in her chest, a kind of defiance that had lain dormant too long. Crowder's voice cut through her thoughts. We'll reach the old canyon by sundown. You'll like it. Good place to bury the past. Evelyn didn't flinch. Good. She whispered, I've got a lot to bury. Crowder didn't notice the tension in her jaw, or the way her eyes flicked to the ridges flanking the trail. But Tayakua did. From above, the Comanche scout moved like wind shadow across the rocks. His eyes never left her. He watched the way she shifted her weight, calculated the strength still in her limbs. Read her body the way he read animal tracks. She wasn't broken. Not yet, and neither was he. The wind rose again, hissing through the rocks. Taikua tasted the direction, smelled the fear, and sweat on the trail below. But time would come soon. They would take her to the canyon. And there, the storm would break, not the kind that comes with thunder and rain, but the kind that rides. On horseback. And doesn't forgive. ChatGPT said. Evelyn awoke to the stench of unwashed bodies, smoke, and stale whiskey. Her mouth was dry as cotton, lips split from sun and dehydration. Above her, the sky was no longer bright. It was fading into burnt orange, the last light. Sliding behind jagged cliffs, the stars would come soon. And with them, God knew what. She was tied to a wooden post, her arms behind her, legs bound at the ankles. Around her, the outlaw camp stirred like a nest of angry snakes. Men shuffled about with rifles and bedrolls, some throwing cards on a flat rock, others spitting into the fire or muttering to themselves. One of them, The one with a scar like a lightning bolt across his cheek was cleaning his revolver without. Looking at it, he didn't need to. Across the fire, Jed Crowder chewed on a strip of dried venison. He hadn't looked at her since they tied her up, like she was a sack of wheat, nothing more. That stung more than the ropes. "What now?" Evelyn asked, voice hoarse but steady. Crowder didn't glance up. "Now, we wait." "For who?" "For someone to miss you," he said. "Or for no one to come at all. Either way, I win. I'm not worth a damn in ransom." Crowder looked up then. "You're not the ransom. You're the bait." Evelyn frowned, blood trickling from her cracked lip. "For who?" He stood slowly, brushing off his coat. "For ghosts, Miss Hart. I aim to make the past bleed." She didn't understand. At first, but then she remembered. Her brother's death. The accusations. The men Jed lost in Comanche territory. The same men her brother supposedly led into a trap. Jed didn't want money. He wanted closure. The violent kind. "I'm not him," she said quietly. Jed nodded. "No, but you'll do." Then he turned and walked toward the canyon's edge, leaving her with the firelight and the whispers of men who'd slit a throat for a coin. Behind her, a voice murmured, "You shouldn't talk back. Just makes him angrier." She twisted her head. A younger outlaw crouched near her, fiddling with a tin cup. Thin, long-necked, with eyes too soft for this crew. "I saw you back in?" "Town," he said. "You told the kids to hide. That was brave." "Brave doesn't count for much out here." "No," he agreed, "but it should." He glanced around, then offered her the cup. "It's only water." She hesitated, then drank. It tasted like dirt, but it was the sweetest thing she'd had in a day. "What's your name?" she asked. "Emmett." "You don't belong." "With them, Emmett." He didn't answer. Just looked at the fire and said, "Neither do you." Before she could speak, Crowder barked something from the other side of camp, and Emmett vanished like smoke. Evelyn sat alone again, her wrists numb, mind racing. She couldn't break the ropes. She couldn't run. And no one was coming. Unless, somewhere out there, the Comanche watched. She felt it, the way a deer feels the eyes of a panther. Tayekua crouched in the dark, a silent shape against the rocks above the camp. Beside him, Nabe held a bow-taut, arrow-nocked. The other warriors moved like wind through mesquite and dry brush-bare feet, painted faces, blades ready. Tayekua watched the red-haired woman below. Her shoulders drooped with exhaustion, but her eyes still held flame. He remembered. Her kneeling beside the sick child, offering medicine with trembling hands but firm words. She had no reason to come to their camp that day, yet she had. His people never forgot kindness. And he didn't forget a debt. He signaled with 2 fingers' weight. The warriors dispersed, each moving toward a target. Down below, the outlaws laughed and passed a bottle, blind to the darkness sharpening around them. Tayekua moved, swift, silent. He took the first sentry. By the throat, one hand over the mouth, the other sliding his knife in deep. No sound, just the slow slide of a body hitting dust. Another warrior felled a man near the horses. Another circled wide toward the firelight, but then steel on stone. A boot kicked a rock, and a gunshot rang out. Chaos erupted. Evelyn flinched as the camp exploded into gunfire and shouting. Emmett ducked beside her, hands trembling. "What the hell, who's attacking?" She didn't wait to ask. "Knife, your belt, now." He hesitated, then shoved his belt knife into her bound hands. She slashed the rope as bullets flew past. Them. 2 outlaws dropped, arrows in their chests. The rest scattered for cover. Jed roared above the din. "It's the savages. Kill them all." He raised his shotgun, just as Tayekua tackled him. The two men crashed to the ground, Tayechua rolling with the momentum, blade flashing. Jed swung the butt of his shotgun wildly, cracking Tayechua across. The temple. Blood sprayed, but the warrior held on, eyes blazing. They grappled near the fire, both men breathing hard, striking with fury, born of memory. Crowder drove his elbow into Taikua's ribs, but the Comanche shoved him back, knife slicing Yet's forearm open. Nearby, Evelyn had freed her feet and scrambled toward the rocks. She saw Tayechua recognizable even in war paint. Their eyes locked. She screamed, "Behind you!" Jed lunged again. Tayechua spun, catching the outlaw's arm and twisting. The knife plunged up, deep into Yet's chest. The outlaw choked, eyes wide. "You?" Tayechua whispered something in Comanche, then let go. Jed crumpled. The rest of the outlaws broke and ran. One was tackled mid-sprint. Another dropped his rifle and kept running, screaming into the night. The Comanche let them go. The battle was over. Evelyn sat on the ground, shaking. Blood ran down her temple. Tayechua approached, his own face bruised and cut. "You came," she said, voice barely a whisper. He nodded. "You were not forgotten." Emmett emerged slowly, hands raised. One of the warriors growled and raised a tomahawk. Evelyn stepped forward. "No, he helped me." Tayechua looked at her, then at Emmett, then lowered the blade. They rode through the night, heading toward Comanche land. Evelyn sat behind Tayechua on his horse, holding tight, her heart thudding in time with each hoof beat. They didn't speak for a long time. The moon rose. Coyotes howled. Finally, she said, "Why me?" He didn't answer right away. "When I lost my wife," he said. No white hands reached out. "Except yours." Evelyn swallowed hard. "I'm sorry. I know," he said. The horizon ahead was silver, with coming dawn. Behind them, the outlaw camp smoldered, silent as the dead. She looked up at the stars. Her wrists still burned from the rope, but inside something else kindled. Not safety, not peace, but possibility. A new fire, not born from hate, but from survival. And the people who chose to fight for it, even when no one else did. The wind shifted again, bringing with it the dry scent of juniper and ash. Evelyn crouched by the fire, hands wrapped around a steaming bowl of broth, and listened to the unfamiliar language flowing around her. She didn't understand the words, but the tone, low, urgent, rhythmic, told her more than the sounds. They were planning something dangerous. Tayechua sat across from her, his face half in shadow, half lit by firelight. The paint he'd worn in battle had long since faded, washed away by sweat and time, but the scars beneath remained. His eyes never strayed from the flames, though she could feel his attention split between her and the warriors that circled them. Like wolves waiting for a decision, she cleared her throat. "You don't trust me." His gaze slid to hers, unreadable. "I trust what I've seen." "And what do you see now?" He studied her. "A woman who survived. A woman who asks questions." "I'll take that as a maybe." He said nothing. But that was something too. Behind them, Nabe approached, his expression tight. He knelt beside Tayechua and murmured a few words in Comanche. Tayechua nodded once, then looked back to Evelyn. "There are more," he said simply. Crowder was not the end. He was a blade, but not the hand holding it. Evelyn frowned. "You? Mean someone else sent him?" "Not sent. Fed. Supported. Promised more." "Promised what?" "Land. Gold. Your people always want more." She winced. "Not all of us." He gave a small shrug. "Enough." Nabe spoke again, this time louder, more urgent. Tayechua listened, then turned back. "They plan to raid the northern camps." Women, children, elders. The next Crowder will not take a hostage. He will take heads. Evelyn set her bowl down. Then let's stop him. Nabe scoffed from behind her, and another warrior muttered, under his breath. She didn't understand the words, but she didn't need to. She could hear the dismissal in their voices, the doubt. Taikoa raised a hand, silencing them. She can help, he said. Naba barked a harsh laugh. She is not one of us. She was not one of them either. Not truly. That silenced the others for a moment. Evelyn stood slowly. I can ride. I can shoot. And I know the terrain better than any of you. You want to stop a raid? Let me guide you. A long pause followed. The fire crackled. Somewhere beyond the clearing, a coyote cried. Finally, Taikoa nodded. We leave. Before moonrise. The next few hours passed in a blur of preparation. Horses were readied, weapons sharpened, food wrapped in cloth and tucked into saddle pouches. Evelyn borrowed a rifle from one of the fallen outlaws, a bolt-action .44 with a scuffed stock but a clean bore. She cleaned it by the fire, silent, hands steady. Taykua approached and knelt beside her. He watched her work in silence for a time. Said you could shoot. She looked up. I can. He tossed a stone into the darkness. It landed near a twisted piece of deadwood. Show me. She didn't hesitate. She rose, sighted, and fired. The bark exploded. He grunted approval. Good. I'm not helpless, she said. I never thought you were. The ride began under the cover of night. 6 riders moved like smoke through the desert, horses barely making a sound over the sand and brush. Evelyn rode beside Taikoa, watching the landscape unfold under the starlight familiar hills, dark gulches, dry creek beds that once flowed. Before the drought hardened them into bone, she spoke sparingly, saving her breath. But in her mind, the pieces turned. Crowder's last words about the debt. The bait. It all pointed to one place, dry Mesa Ridge, a place she'd avoided for years. Not just for the danger, but for what it meant. Her brother's last stand. The place he'd made his fatal mistake trying to forge peace. Now, it would be the site of another battle. At dawn, they reached the ridge. The sun crept over the horizon like a slow blade. The land below stretched out in uneven ridges and scrub-filled. Valleys with a winding canyon cutting through it like a scar. Smoke curled up from a camp nestled in the rocks below tents. Wagons and at least 20 men, armed. Restless. Taykua peered through a spyglass, then handed it to her. Recognize anyone? Evelyn took it. The glass revealed a camp bristling with weapons and cruelty. Then she saw him Thorn. She muttered the name like it tasted foul. Taykua frowned. Who is he? Silas Thorn, former deputy turned gunrunner. He worked with my brother once, then betrayed him. Left him for dead. I thought he vanished after the war. He didn't vanish, Taikoa said. He gathered snakes. Nabe crawled up beside them. We attack now? Evelyn shook her head. No, that canyon has only one exit. If we rush in, they'll pick us off from the rocks. We need to flush them out, scare them, turn their numbers against them. Taikoa raised an eyebrow. You have a plan? She nodded. They spent the next hour preparing. When the attack came, it began with fire. Dry branches soaked in oil ignited like lightning when tossed into the outer tents. Panic surged through the outlaw camp. Shouting, stumbling, gunshots fired. Into the smoke as shadows danced around them, Evelyn moved through the haze like a ghost, rifle tight in her hands. She picked her shots, striking knees, shoulders, never wasting a bullet. Taykua and his warriors struck from above, arrows raining. Down like vengeance. Thorn emerged from the main tent, shouting orders and cursing. He wore a battered hat and a silver badge he hadn't earned in a decade. Evelyn aimed, paused, then lowered the rifle and moved closer. Face. Thorn turned and froze. "Well, I'll be," he said. "Little Evelyn Hart, come back for you." "Mother's bones? I came to bury you," she said. He laughed. "You think you can take me? With what your borrowed gun and your half-naked friends?" She stepped closer, heart pounding. "No, with truth." And she fired. The shot tore through his thigh. He went down screaming. Tayekua leapt from the rocks, blade in hand. The other warriors followed, driving the remaining men into surrender. Or silence. By noon, it was over. The camp burned. Smoke curled into the blue sky. The few surviving outlaws lay bound, eyes wide with fear. Tayekua stood over Thorn, who lay bleeding, muttering curses. "Spare him," Evelyn said quietly. Tayekua looked at her. "Why?" "Because he needs to face what he's done. Justice isn't death, not today." Tayekua considered, then nodded. The warriors stripped Thorn of his weapons, his pride, and left him in the dust to crawl. Evelyn sat down, exhausted, the rifle resting across her lap. Tayekua joined her. "You led us well." "I didn't lead," she said. "I just didn't run. Sometimes that's the same." She looked at him. "What now?" He gestured to the horizon. "Now you choose." She saw the smoke trailing off into the wind. The fire was done. The knife had struck, but something new waited beyond the ridge. Not peace. Not yet, but the beginning of something worth protecting. Under a sky streaked with dusk and blood, the canyon whispered its secrets. The wind moved low through the red rock walls, hissing across dry stone like the breath of spirits long buried. The place held memory in its bones of battles, betrayals, promises broken in dust and fire. Evelyn Hart stood on the canyon rim, staring down into its hollowed silence. Behind her, the Comanche warriors waited, still and watchful, their faces painted with meaning. Below, in the shadows of rock and thorn, Thorn's men regrouped. It should have been over, but war never ends in one battle. It lingers in echoes, in scars, in the voices that refuse to fall silent. Nabe stepped up beside her. They returned. Evelyn nodded. "Thorn's men?" "No, others, the ones behind him. They come to finish what he started." "How many?" "Too many." She tightened her grip on the rifle. Her shoulders still ached from the last fight, and the bruises across her ribs hadn't faded, but the fire inside her hadn't dimmed either. Tayekua emerged from the shadows, his eyes scanning the horizon. He moved like the canyon's own shadow, silent, shaped by wind and time. "They know we're here." "Then they're coming for blood," she said. "They'll get their share," he replied, then looked to her. "But not ours." Evelyn watched as the sky turned darker, tinged violet and gold. A hawk cried overhead, circling in slow loops, its wings catching the wind. She thought about the first time she'd come to this canyon, years ago, before the dust had filled her lungs and the fear had hardened her skin. She'd ridden beside her brother, both of them full of foolish dreams about peace between people who'd never known how to speak the same language. That peace had died with him, but something new had taken root in the aftermath, something fragile but burning. Survival, respect, and maybe, just maybe, the start of understanding. The echo of hoofbeats pulled her out of thought. From the east, the new enemy came. Dust clouds rose behind them, dozens of riders, hard-eyed and fast. They wore no uniforms, just guns and rage. Mercenaries, land raiders, hired blades with no loyalty but coin. Tayekua glanced toward the ridge. The canyon narrows ahead. "We can hold them there." "If we fall back too far," Nabe said, They'll reach the village. They won't, Evelyn said. We end it here. The canyon mouth stretched below like a gaping wound, its narrow pass perfect for an ambush. But it would be close, too close. She turned to Tayekua. You trust me? He met her eyes. I have no reason to. She smiled bitterly. Then we'll get along just fine. Night came fast in the desert. The warriors spread out, blending into the rocks and cliffs. Evelyn moved with them, every sense on edge, the wind sharp in her lungs. She found a perch halfway up the canyon wall, nestled behind a spire of stone. From here, she had a clear view of the entrance. Tayekua positioned himself on the opposite side, Nabe down below near the choke point. They waited. Silence crept in, heavy and tense. Then a single horse whinnied. The first raider entered the canyon, rifle across his lap. Behind him, more. 15, 20, maybe more. They came in like a slow wave, unaware of the trap tightening around them. When the signal came, a high whistle like a hawk's cry, the canyon came alive. Arrows flew from the cliffs. Bullets cracked like thunder. The lead rider dropped, blood spraying from his throat. Another tumbled off his mount, screaming. Chaos erupted in the canyon mouth as horses reared and men scrambled for cover. The Comanche rained hell from above, their war cries slicing through the night. Evelyn picked her shots, the rifle bucking in her hands. One man tried to scale the rocks toward her. She dropped him with a shot to the chest, but it wasn't enough. More kept coming. Explosions rocked the lower ridge as the raiders lobbed dynamite into the rocks. A boulder split, sending shards flying. Nabe was thrown back, his leg crushed beneath debris. Tayekua! Evelyn shouted, but her voice was lost in the gunfire. Below, Tayekua charged into the fray, blade drawn. He moved like lightning, cutting. Down a rider before grabbing Nabai and dragging him to cover. Evelyn scrambled down the rocks, nearly slipping. Dust and blood coated her face. She found a gap in the ridge and slid down, landing beside them. He's bleeding bad, she said, pulling her scarf to bind Nabe's leg. Tayekua didn't stop. We hold this canyon, or we die here. She didn't argue. Another boom shook the ground. A new voice rose in the dark deep, commanding. The raiders had a leader now. She saw him riding into the mouth of the canyon, tall, with silver hair and a shotgun in each hand. His coat flapped like wings, and his voice cut through the noise. Burn it all. Smoke the vermin out. The raiders surged again. Evelyn grabbed her rifle and fired until it clicked empty. She drew a revolver from her belt, bloodied but ready. Tayekua fought beside her, every movement fluid and furious. Then the wind changed. From the far side of the canyon came a second war cry high. Shrill, familiar. Reinforcements. More Comanche riders poured in from the west, descending the ridge like a storm. They'd come not for vengeance, but to protect what remained. The raiders broke. Some dropped their weapons. Some fled into the dark. A few stood their ground, and paid for it in blood. The leader raised his shotgun only to have it struck from his hand by an arrow. Tayekua was on him in seconds. The two men clashed, old warriors with nothing left to lose. Evelyn watched as they grappled. The raider fought dirty, throwing dust, biting, spitting blood. But Tayekua fought like a man with something worth protecting. He landed a final blow to the throat, sending the man crumpling into the dirt. It was done. Silence returned to the canyon, broken only by the moans of the dying and the crackle of fire. The wind stirred again, softer this time, like it remembered mercy. Evelyn knelt beside Nabe, still alive, barely. You stayed, he murmured. So did you. Tayekua joined them, his face streaked with blood and dust. He looked to the horizon, where dawn was just beginning to pale the sky. We buried our dead here once, he said. Long ago, The canyon does not forget. Neither do I, Evelyn said. They worked together to bury the fallen Comanche and enemy alike. No graves were marked with names. Only stones. Only silence. When the work was done, Evelyn stood at the edge of the canyon once more. The wind tugged at her hair. Behind her, the others prepared to return to the village. To safety, Tayechua approached. "You could come with us," he said. "There is space, a place to heal." She looked out at the land. "I might, but I also might stay." He nodded. "This place has memory, but it also forgives." She smiled faintly. "Do you?" He didn't answer, just looked at her with those deep, storm-dark eyes, then turned and walked away. She remained there a moment longer. The canyon remembered. It had seen blood, sorrow, betrayal, but it had also seen courage, loyalty, and something close to redemption. She had come here a captive, then a fighter, now something in between. A survivor who bore witness to the past and who still chose to face the future. She turned, walked toward the rising light, and didn't look back, not because the canyon didn't matter, but because it always would.